Hi, colleagues. It seems like I'm not winning, but okay, let me just switch off because now I'm on two devices at the same time. Colleagues, can you still hear the echo because I've switched it off on the other side? If someone can just maybe unmute themselves and tell me, can you hear an echo if I'm speaking?
No, there's no echo from my side.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you. I apologize profusely to everyone. I have no idea what is going on with Blackboard today. I've tried everything I could in the past 30 minutes to fix it, but since we have people here and people have shared generously their time, I think we need to start. But it just it's raised because. Sorry, it's just very sad because it means I can't record the session, but I think we can still have a discussion. As many of you know, the idea behind this session was that we were to have student reflections on what it means or what it has meant to do anthropological research in such a challenging climate as 2020 has been for many students. So we know that, for instance, one of the key aspects of anthropological research is the idea of being there physically present in the space, talking to people. Lots of anthropologists write about central scholarship where you touch your participants and you engage in various activities in social life with them. But obviously, in the context of COVID-19, we know that this wasn't always possible. So the idea behind this session was to just hear from students themselves what some of your activities in this particular time period. And without wasting any time, I won't do the complex introductions. I'll let the speaker introduce themselves. So Nadine, you are up first. Can you share with us some of your experiences in the process of doing research this year? But make sure, please start by just introducing yourself, telling other people a little bit about your research project, and then if you don't mind sharing how you found experiences doing research this year from basically the good to the ugly. So Nadine, over to you.
Hi everyone, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so I'm a master's student from UJ, and I'm sure everybody here today has been hard hit by the pandemic in some way. And like all the other panelists, my project has been affected by the pandemic. So just to give you guys some insight into what I wanted to do. So I am a classically trained musician. And for my project, what I wanted to do was study music and Pentecostalism at Christian Revival Church. And I thought that this would be something unique to do because I can view or conduct, or at least that was the plan, was to be a musician at Christian Revival Church, to go into the space, to become a part of the music ministry team, to have these experiences as someone who's part of the choir band, or essentially someone who's part of the music ministry team, people who create music in the space of the church. Ooh, okay, yeah. And obviously, lockdown has affected my ability to do this because churches were closed down, and only recently, like a month ago, church doors were open again, which meant that I essentially had to become a part of the online space. And my project only got ethical clearance in June. So prior to that, my plan was to conduct preliminary research. And what I wanted to do was look at all of the social media platforms that CRC is associated with. So follow them on Instagram, watch all of their lives, attend all church services, conferences, virtually speaking, weekly home cells, which are smaller groups, well, online now, groups of people who gather together on platforms such as Zoom or WhatsApp to pray, to sing, just to speak about the church services from the weekend and during the week. And I watch several Instagram lives. I follow all of my participants' social media, the Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp. I also follow CRC on Spotify and YouTube. And the idea was to understand or see how participants reflect on their experiences. So I've used these platforms as a self-reflective tool to see how my participants think about and write about the experiences of the pandemic, and also what they write about in relation to Pentecostalism, in relation to the Word of God that they receive, in relation to the music that's performed during church services or Instagram lives, whatever it may be. And obviously it's been difficult to do because everyone else, well, as I mentioned, everyone seemingly is going through something right now. So essentially, I've converted my entire project into online ethnography. And this has been challenging with load shedding because there was a stage like a month or 2 months ago where we were hard hit by load shedding, and my participants would tell me, sorry, I know that we were going to talk via Zoom or we were going to do calls or whatever, and these things had to be moved around quite frequently. So that was one of the challenges which I experienced, is load shedding, but also finding the time to actually talk to my participants over a phone call, a video call, or whatever. This is why I started following their social media, because I found that they would post certain videos, they would talk, or like for my younger participants, they would post TikTok videos where they would just, I don't know, share what it is that they are going through at a particular moment in time. So I'm currently moving into my second month of online ethnography, well, official online ethnography, because I have been doing this since the start of Feb until eventually I got ethical clearance and essentially had to continue doing this online ethnography. And it's only when I started speaking to my co-supervisor that I realized that I actually want to change my entire project to online ethnography, because otherwise I'd just be sitting at home waiting for an opportunity to go to the field. And I've chosen to stick with online ethnography because the pandemic is not, it hasn't disappeared, it's still there. So I've chosen to protect myself, protect my participants, and now, gosh, sorry guys, I'm very nervous. I don't know why. Now, essentially, I have to think of innovative ways to conduct this online ethnography because it is different and it's something that I'm not accustomed to. But my supervisor shared a powerful statement with me that thinking about online ethnography is essentially thinking of the online space as an extension of the real world. And what this means is that it's no less rich or valuable than conventional ethnography if we find ways to ensure that we still end up with these thick descriptions. So yeah, that's all I have to share for now. Thank you.
Fantastic. Fantastic. And there's absolutely no reason to be nervous. You've given us quite a lot to think about. And I think particularly your last point around, because we often think about ethnography as only being like in the physical realm, but there's no denial, that it's certainly in the past at least 2 decades that so much of our lives, of course, it has its own privileges with internet access and so on. But we know that in some ways, for sure, the online has certainly come to be an extension of the so-called real world. And I know you have to leave in an hour or so, but I don't want to put you on the spot immediately. I'll get to some of the points. I think you've raised also like issues around structural limitations around doing online ethnography. So issues of load shedding, for instance, which we know, I'm lucky to live in an area where it's not such a major issue. Sorry for that. I got cut off. But I just went. I locked down. Particularly before we got to level 2. So thank you so much for those reflections. But like I said, I'll maybe give 2 people a chance, and then I'll come back with some questions before you leave. So you're not going to leave without any questions directed at you. Okay, I think let's go to because the next person on my list is Simphiwe. Simphiwe, I have on Facebook, and I was one of the readers for his PhD proposal at Wits, and at some point we ended up social media friends. And I've been following your journey quite closely in the past few months of doing field work in the KZN. So I'm wondering if you can share, first of all, tell us a little bit about you and your own experiences. And just to say that Simphiwe is not, quote unquote, a traditional anthropology student, but I thought it would be useful to have a diversity of student experiences, not just in anthropology, but also in the broader social sciences, to reflect on doing social science research, and more specifically for us, anthropological research in this particular time period. So, Simphiwe, over to you.
All right, thanks, Qcobani. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks, Qcobani, for the invite to speak and for the disclaimer. I was like, should I or should I not disclaim that I'm not an anthropologist? So I'm Simphiwe Ngwane. I'm a part-time PhD candidate at Wits. So my study is somewhat interdisciplinary because I'm at African literature and it's also a bit of media. So my PhD is on Igezalensizwa and a supplement which is published by Ilanga newspaper called Ilanga Letego. And so I'm interested in portraits that the supplements used to publish over a period of 7 years. So I'm interested in looking at shifts in ideas of Zulu masculinities and ideas of soft Zulu masculinities. So since I was a part-time student, I was pretty excited about, because my proposal passed in Jan. I submitted my ethical clearance, and I think I submitted in Feb. And then I think by that time, COVID at kind of some institutions weren't working as optimally and stuff. So I submitted my ethical clearance stuff, and I waited, and then by March, because as I said, I'm working, so I was pretty excited. Everyone told me that the fieldwork aspect is pretty fun. And I booked leave, I booked flights to go to KZN in Durban and Potchefstroom, and then bam, the president announced that there'll be a hard lockdown. And I had a choice to make whether to wait it out, because I was pretty naive. I thought it would just be the initial 21 days that he announced, and then we'll be back to normal. Then, as you're speaking that Sunday, I realized no, I'll be left with no work, and I didn't want to be idle, because my proposal had passed. I was just waiting for my ethical clearance, and so what was I going to do for that period? So that Sunday, when the president announced, I shifted my flights and I flew down to Durban. I called my employer, told them I'm not around for the week. I need to go to the archives in Durban, because that aspect I didn't need approval for, because it was a public archive. So I headed down, and I spent a day and a half there, and it was just filled up with anxiety. Something that should have been fun, but because of I think at that time masks weren't mandatory, and Discount was sold out and whatnot, so I had just my hand sanitizer with me. So I went to King Shaka and stuff. So it was literally just a day and a half of scanning the portraits, so that I can have a bit of work whilst we wait out the lockdowns, before we even knew there'll be various levels. So so I was lucky in that sense that I made a decision that Sunday to change my flights and go down to Durban and because the data I'll be using is the archive, the portraits themselves of Amageza. So Amageza, it's a young Zulu man. And there were different ideas of what the young Zulu man is or should be. So there were shifts in that kind of depiction of them. So I went down and collected those over a day and a half. I collected most, about 6 years worth. So at least I had work to do during the lockdown. And of course, one thinks you're going to be hell of a productive during that time, but when your routine is messed up, but initially I was productive. I mean, I used that time to begin analyzing and transcribing, because the papers in Zulu and the captions which accompany the photographs needed translation, needed me to start developing a glossary. So I think I as a creature of habit, I'm quite a pedantic person who likes to be organized, and I don't like change that much. So it took a while to develop a routine, because I was so used to waking up early at 4 a.m., start my day with my readings and analysis, get ready for work at 7, and leave at 8. So now, when that was all gone, the daily train to work in the Joburg CBD, that was gone. It made life a bit difficult, because I thought I had all this time in the world. I'll be done. I had a plan. By month, what's I'll be this far. And so I had to kind of readjust. But I think since I had all the data, so some days I kind of did more admin work of just cataloging things and dating them. Some days I did the transcribing and the analysis. So, and then during, I think it was level 3, I got my ethical clearance to actually start approaching the photographers that took the images and the editorial team of Ilanga. So at that time, I reached out to them via social media. And I told them, like, we have to wait until level 3 when flights are allowed. I think level 2 or 3 when interprovincial travel was allowed. And so when eventually it was allowed, I think end of August, and then because I contemplated doing it virtually, but I think because being in Durban, and also very much the study is about a particular, but the portraits were taken in a particular area, which is the Durban Point by the harbour, by Ushaga Marine World, towards the harbour. So it was the oldest piece of Durban, basically. Most of the photographs taken there. So I kind of needed that experience with the place and be able to recognize the backgrounds of the images and where the guys were posed. So luckily level 2 came along about August, so it didn't shift my plan too much, and I headed down, and luckily my respondents were available. But then of course, in keeping with the regulations and stuff, so we met in open areas and stuff. So at least I was able to do that. I didn't have to. I think only did one interview via MS Teams, and that I did a few weeks back. But it's been, yeah, I think it worked out, and also limitations of resources, because libraries are closed now, and you kind of, okay, where will I get books? And I had to learn how to use Amazon, what's it, Kindle, which I don't like ebooks. I had to learn how to loan books via Amazon. So the limitations also helped for me to learn new skills and be able to gather sources in much more innovative way. And as I'm back here, I've had to, my brother's back home in Maritzburg, so I normally call him. I'm like, I need this in the archive. So I've in that sense, me not being able to go all the time, also I've been able to count on him to go do my scan one document for me, or this. But then the mad dash of it all, of running to get the documentation, also there were some things I didn't scan properly. So I mean, I think the pandemic also, it rushes things, and I don't know, the sense of anxiety kind of riddles my work, where you're trying to do things as quick as possible, but you aren't as thorough. You have to go back, so you're doing double work because you just don't know when we'll move to the next level. But all in all, I've tried to keep to my plan, and I mean, I could have allowed myself to have those moments of, I think I did have moments of melancholy and somewhat self-doubt. I think especially since now the workload had dropped, and then I thought, oh gosh, I have so much time. I could push out so many chapters by this time. But there were times where you just had to kind of just feel the feelings of the pandemic and the anxiety that come with it. But yeah, as Qcobani has said, I managed to do the interviews. I've transcribed most of the stuff. I've written one chapter, so I've been productive. But then in between all of that, there were spells where I just had that, kind of mourning one's routine, mourning how things were, being able to take walks. I think I walked my little dachshund a bit too much during that time, trying to develop a routine and change routines. But it worked out. It worked out because I held off going virtual because I kind of needed that walking about at the point. I think, I don't know, it kind of helped working in governments, because you kind of hear corridor talk when the levels are going to be moving. So I kind of use that to my benefit to plan around. But yeah, I think, Qcobani, can I just leave it here?
Yes, no, absolutely. Thank you for that, Simphiwe. That was quite comprehensive, and I think it ties very nicely to sort of some of the issues Nadine sort of faced with moving online, and I think you highlight the other dynamic to it, which is the certain things that even the online sort of platform don't give us, which is, for instance, for you being in that particular area where these photographs were taken. So there's no amount of sort of online pictures you can get that give you that sense. And I think also you raise an important issue around what the pandemic has meant for limitations, especially in terms of archival research. And so what happens when the libraries are closed and you want particular artifacts or particular manuscripts. And I think, as well, one of the things I still haven't been able to adjust to it, but the use of ebooks. I like writing notes and I like the physical feel of a book. So even for me, it's been quite a challenge to now have to, in some ways, rely, or certainly before level 1, to rely so much on electronic resources. It's been quite a challenge. So thank you for so much for that. Just to prepare you, Nadine, I'm not going to ask you a specific question, but if someone has one for you, feel free to literally just unmute yourself, because now I'm on the I'm the okay. I think I did move myself to moderator when I got on. But anyways, it doesn't have to be too formal. If you have a question that's specific to Nadine, who has to go in about 15 minutes, please feel free to shout. But I would prefer all the other questions come in the question and answer discussion, in the question and answer session. Thank you so much, Nadine and Simphiwe. I think let's go to Northwest University. And let's start with Bafana. Bafana, you sent me a beautiful poem that I won't read, but I want you to talk us through some of your own work and your own experiences in this particular time, or as a student, a postgraduate student who's doing research in this particular time. So over to you, Bafana.
Thank you, Gcobani, for this opportunity, and good day, everyone. I don't know if you can all hear me, just if I can begin. Okay, if you can just say something if you hear me.
I can hear you, Bafana.
Okay. Okay, cool. So, I'm just going to start from the beginning. My name is Bafana Monatshana. I'm an honor student in Wits University of Storm campus. So, like, in the beginning of the year, I came to Storm with the intention of, like, all I had in mind was the colonial venues in education. So I just wanted to understand how students would sort of come up with means of, say, for example, bring their African-centered knowledge in a means of education, like how students bring their African-centered knowledge to the fore, how they display colonial values in education. And my focus was mainly on awareness for students. So when like the corona thing happened and everything went into frenzy, I saw it as an opportunity to say, like, take a different approach, because at first I went home before the beginning of the national lockdown because I wanted to go like get the rest of my stuff and come back to finally move to Potchefstroom. And when I came back to Potchefstroom, I learned of the university's early recess and the national lockdown. So the early recess and the closure of universities meant that students could no longer attend contact classes. So this made me, like, I was kind of stressed and anxious about what's going to happen to me, because I knew for a fact that online learning required like a set of tools, computer, the internet, for instance. And as a student from a low-income household, I knew that for a fact. And as far as they didn't really provide students with, say, allowances and stuff like that. And I was kind of concerned about how other students or how NSFAS students are dealing with these situations. So my research is basically focused on how NSFAS students navigate and adapt to this remote learning and teaching practices because of the COVID pandemic. Like before I went to the field, I thought doing research online would be easy since all I had to do was just take my phone and WhatsApp someone. So I thought, oh, it would be much easier to do research online since, well, I could just access anyone at any time. But the reality was different in a sense that, first of all, we did not decide to study remotely. This was kind of forced on us. Not all of us decided, okay, this year I want to do remote learning, I want to do distant learning. So kind of got me, and I wanted to know how NSFAS students dealing with these new realities and this new online learning environment. So as I said, I assumed it would be much easier to do research online, but it turned out that that was not the case. First of all, there's an issue of digital divide, which in simple terms mean like the distinction between access to internet and digital technologies and those who don't have the access. And the first thing I realized was that not everyone has access to like, the internet. Yes, it's true the NSFAS and the universities have plans to say offer students laptops, give them data monthly, but not all of the students receive laptops, not all of them received data. So it was kind of a problem for me because as much as I thought it'd be easier to talk to these students, it was difficult in a sense that they did not have the kind of necessary tools that are required for them to compete in an online environment. So, and as a student also, I also experienced sort of challenges where I did not have access to the Wi-Fi or an internet. And in the beginning of the year, I like really struggled to get a laptop, which was something that I really need to compete also in this online learning environment. So the second thing that was like a major problem for me in the field was that when there was like when people or the international interprovincial movement was allowed, where students were allowed to campuses, the selection of like those students who were allowed to come back to campuses were sort of, I can just put it in simple terms, most social science students were not allowed to come back to campuses. Only engineering, those who are deemed important or sort of necessary, were only allowed to come back to campuses. And when I like selected my research party, I didn't really think about doing which course and whatnot. I just wanted to do research based on NSFAS students. So most of the participants I had, they did not come back to campus or were not allowed to go back to campus in the first phase. So that meant they did not have exclusive access to the internet and a computer per se. So when I go to the field and try to conduct interviews and stuff like that, it was a challenge for me in a sense that like the first people I had planned to do my research with, they started pulling out of this research as soon as like the universities opened. They had like a lot of work to do on their own. So they decided that they could no longer continue with the research since they had a lot to do. And secondly, those who agreed and who continued with my research until the end, at some point, like there was times where we agreed on a certain day to conduct interviews, but it turned out they had a lot of academic work on their side. They were always busy, like everyone was busy. And it was kind of a challenge for me since I could not do my research or interviews on time. And one of the things that I planned to do in the field was that I intended to do some focus group or online focus where
Hi, Bafana. Okay, I see he's reconnecting. I think we've lost Bafana. But in that meantime, Nadine, I know you have to head out in 7 minutes' time, so I'm gonna give you a chance to sort of offer your closing thoughts, or if anyone has a specific question for you before you go, this will be the time, and then I'll come back to Bafana once he's been able to reconnect. Right, Nadine?
Okay, so I just want to leave on the note of um, how my project looks currently. So before lockdown, like before I had the intention of um, going into the field and conducting participant observation by being a musician at the church, I thought that okay, I lost my train of thought. Essentially, my project has changed significantly because I was going to go into the field and conduct participant observation. And the focus would have been Pentecostalism and music and understanding the everyday experiences, the lives of Pentecostals at CRC. But now, in line with all of the challenges which I faced, and I've started shifting like my thinking, and now I think I'm more centered around how anthropologists, or thinking about how anthropologists conduct ethnography during a pandemic. Because it's like I mentioned, it's new, and I now have to think of these creative ways to get the information to make sure that I'm still doing rich ethnography. I'm spending enough time with my participants, which hasn't really happened yet. But I think because of what my plan is right now, I'm basically just looking at my participants' social media. I have discussions with them about church services and, so, home cells and what they are going through, how their week's looking. And some of my participants have been retrenched, have no idea what they are going to do next. So it's certainly a new experience, and dealing with all of these emotions that come with my personal experience and also the experiences of my participants. I've really started thinking about how anthropologists conduct ethnography during a pandemic, and that's sort of looking like what the focus will be for my master's.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nadine. You were fantastic, and thank you for giving us your time. I'm so sorry about the difficult technical difficulties we faced, because it's very clear from your contributions that we would have gained a lot from you during the discussion, but certainly you've really given us a lot already. And I just want to settle you and say, like, especially I think students get really overwhelmed that you have to find all the answers to these complex questions around what is rich ethnography, what is authentic ethnography, what is authentic anthropological research. And these questions, even by professors and experts and people with like 40 years of experience doing anthropological research, are not settled. And I think part of this dialogue was around really opening up conversations around those opportunities that Bafana was hinting, but also looking at what are some of the challenges, what are the limitations, how far can we really go with online ethnography. So I love that you are really thinking about these questions, and already that you are thinking through these questions, I can already see that you will actually provide a rich ethnography, because rich ethnographies don't always necessarily give good answers, but they do raise good questions about various forms of our social lives. So thank you very much, Nadine, for that. Okay, Bafana, are you able to speak now? Because we lost you for a bit, but I think you were closing off. So the last part we heard about was sort of the issues around laptop access, as well as social science students not really being allowed back into campus, and the challenges that presented for your research, which was really focused on sort of NSFAS participants. So do you want to close off before I move on to the next speaker, Bafana?
Okay. Yeah, like I was saying, most of my participants were like social science students. So the fact that they were not allowed into campuses in the first phase, and that they did not have like exclusive access to the internet and proper device. So I was really starting to conduct research with them, in a sense that sometimes they did not have internet data. Some of them didn't even have like a proper device to work on. And since I did most of my research or my interviews via WhatsApp, and as I assumed that it would be much easier, it was different because sometimes they did not log in face and they did not respond. And that's when while I was doing the interview, just log out the following day. So it was kind of frustrating for me and challenging, in a sense that I get to do my work on time. That's the kind of challenges I faced while I was doing research, because my research was focused on Black NSFAS students and how they basically deal with the realities of online learning in a pandemic. Because, as I said, this was not planned and students didn't have enough time to prepare for online learning. It was just happened in an instant. So none of us had enough time to prepare, like had time to adjust to this online learning. So our students were struggling on their side with this online learning experiences. I was also struggling as a student and also as a researcher to do my field work. Yeah, I think I've said enough for now. And thank you, Gcobani, for this opportunity.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you so much, Bafana, for that. And I think one of the most interesting things for me from your really, I mean, you had all three of the speakers so far, Simphiwe, Nadine, and you have had such layered reflections, and it's so interesting how they all build on each other. In many ways, Simphiwe's work shows the limitation of, Nadine moving just online, because there are certain things, but I think yours gives us in some ways a rich, because so much of what we focused about is really not, but I think yours in some ways shows also the embodiment of these challenges, that these are not just challenges that are out there and not being able to access participants, but you yourself as a student doing research, coming from a low income background, the various challenges that you faced alongside your participants. And I think that gives us a new nuanced look as well at how research itself can often be classed and experienced depending on your kind of access, whether it be laptops or facilities on campus and so on. So I think this is also going to be rich. And I see Dr. Jess is one of the participants. You know, Anthropology Southern Africa right now is doing a special issue on teaching during the pandemic. And I think this is also something to reflect on. What has it then meant to do research? And I think, you know, if they ever have that special issue, I will be very unhappy if I don't see your paper there, because I think you raise so many interesting issues around, both for the researcher, but also certainly for the participants around research during this particular context, especially in higher education. So thank you very much, Bafana, for that. Okay, let's go back to UJ, because we've just lost one UJN, Nadine. So Praveer, you have to fill in for UJ for us. You've also sent me some beautiful writings, but I won't go through that. I think you can speak through for yourself. Just tell us a little bit about yourself. I know Praveer has, one of the reasons why I invited him is done quite a lot of work, even pre-pandemic, on online ethnography as well. So I thought, you know, this period an interesting one for you, who's a young researcher who had already been engaging issues of online ethnography long before the pandemic hit us. So without any blabbering from me, over to you, Praveer.
Thank you, Qambela. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me on this panel. I'm Praveer, currently in my first year of my PhD study. Still in the proposal stages of my study. My study focuses on the rise of digital health surveillance and knowledge production during the COVID-19 pandemic in South Africa. So basically, I intend looking at like different health institutions and how kind of social media itself is used to disseminate and create health information and share it amongst the public. So kind of lucky or unlucky for me, I'm not in the field as yet. But specifically, online research kind of this year in particular has helped me kind of to network and identify key participants and informants I'd like to speak to, and it kind of helps streamline the whole process to reach out to them instead of going through this whole kind of gated process to kind of get access. So just kind of help to kind of identify them. But sorry, I'm just rambling a bit here. Overall, my experience of research this year has been quite different and quite challenging. As we all know, like postgraduate studies can be quite isolating, and you feel like you're on your own quite a lot. And I feel like the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated this experience, particularly because in terms of you have to kind of, from my experience, I had to do my research, my writing, my reading, combine it with teaching and learning online with the undergraduate students. So some days it was really intense to kind of balance everything and kind of get a key direction each day on what you want to do. You had to kind of go with the flow. But basically, you know, my supervisors were also so wonderful. They would always be willing to speak to me about my research and help guide my ideas. But basically, I know Qcobani kind of mentioned that I have experience doing online ethnography. So I learned all this experience during my master's study, looking at social media use by car culture within South Africa. So a lot of the ideas and kind of experiences that are afforded to us by technology and this online socialization is kind of evident now and kind of being brought to the fore by COVID-19 and the shift to online activities. I myself, I love technology so much and believe it can be used for good if used ethically and responsibly. But basically now with the whole COVID-19 pandemic, I kind of have to agree with the works of Morozov and Gladwell, where they kind of describe how technology and social media itself it lacks that face-to-face interaction that's afforded to us by our daily life. And I find myself a lot during this COVID-19 pandemic missing campus life and missing the walk to our anthropology department, interacting with the different student assistants, the secretaries, the different lecturers I would meet. Just kind of speaking to the other postgraduate students about our research, and like kind of procrastinating and how we kind of not doing our work if we're supposed to be doing it. But basically, yeah, that's about it for me for now. If you have any questions, just kind of let me know. Thanks, everyone.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Praveer. And I have to say, I was very surprised by your ending, because anytime I've worked with Praveer, he's always very efficient, and so I was shocked to learn that you also procrastinate. So now I feel like a human being as well. I'm kidding. No, thank you very much, Praveer. And I think, again, your contributions are adding another layer, which is, first of all, a student who is also teaching, engaging in research, but also experiencing it at a personal level, having experienced it through your own previous work for your master's and now your own interest in digital health. And I think you also spoke about something very important, and I think Bafana was hinting at it together with Nadine as well, which is this issue of support. And I think that's also one of the things we haven't really spoken about so far on the panel, which is the kinds of support that postgraduate students have needed in this particular time period, whether it's from supervisors. I mean, also we know in South Africa issues of data, the issues that Bafana was talking about with laptops and so on. So various kinds of social, psychosocial, structural kinds of support that students have needed in this time period. Because I do think it's an obvious thing that everyone has been saying about how this pandemic has really not created, but really revealed the prevailing inequalities. So thank you very much for that. And I think you also, hint around as well, like Simphiwe, which is the sort of limitations, even as you recognize the potential of social media usage when it's ethical, but also the limitations sometimes around not being able to connect, to see people, and so on. So that was very valuable. Thank you very much, Praveer. Okay, let's go to Wits now. Keketso also, like all the others, you sent me stuff, but I'm not going to read it. But you can just tell people a little bit about yourself, and then just go into your reflection.
Okay, thank you, Gcobani, for the invite, and hello to everybody. My name is Keketso. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Johannesburg, and I recently started with my PhD about a year ago, September 2019, and since then until April 2020, I worked on creating a proposal for my research. So my research that I proposed to do is on fake pharmaceutical drugs in Tanzania, looking into antimalarial drugs. It's part of a larger project that falls under the term, the name was taken a fake in the Indian pharmaceuticals and African markets and global health. So what I plan to do is to research about antimalarial drugs, what people think about fake antimalarial drugs within their own context in Morogoro town in Tanzania, looking mostly on their own explanations and discussions and narratives about what constitutes a drug to be fake, not necessarily looking at the biological or chemical composition of the drug, but based on their own interaction with the drug, maybe through using it, buying it, or through what people usually say about fake drugs within the spaces they live. So I plan to locate my study within drug shops that are available in Morogoro town, which are used mostly by people to access the drugs they need, including antimalarial drugs. And comparing to the research that I did before for both my honors and masters, I did my research on the use of a drug called Nyaupe in a Soweto township where I grew up. So basically, I was doing my research within the spaces I lived, within the spaces I was familiar to, with the people I grew up with, my friends. We use local terminologies, we use local languages, and it was like conducting research at home. And now with the shift to now having to conduct my research away from home in a new country where people speak different languages, it was quite challenging itself, but it was something I was also looking forward to. So I was actually looking forward to going there and engaging with the spaces, engaging with the people, learning a new language, and being there physically in the space, in the drug shops, in the town itself. That was something that I was actually looking forward to. And now, after I finished with my proposal around April and May, my supervisor and I sent it for it to be read by external readers. And during that time, we were already, I think, in level 4 of the pandemic around May, at the beginning of May. And when the COVID-19 hit and we entered into lockdown and couldn't go anywhere, it was quite challenging for me, something I didn't actually expect. COVID-19 pandemic came to us by surprise without expecting it. So it affected me a lot in terms of what it now means for my research now that we are on lockdown. At the beginning, it was, of course, the president said it was a 21-day lockdown, and as it progressed and announced that it was extended, I was now forced to face the question that I most of the time avoided and say, you might pass and you might go back to the field. But as time went, the reality hit that actually we might not actually go into the field. So like Simphiwe, I was looking forward to go to the field. I was a little bit skeptical of doing research online, and now I had to face this challenge of, okay, this might not happen, and what does this mean for my research? So I avoided answering the question, I avoided even thinking about doing my research online, because for me it was accessibility. Okay, I'm here in South Africa. How am I going to get access to people living in Tanzania, in certain drug shops? What is this going to mean? So I actually, for the time, I started not to think about those challenges, and I mostly focused on, okay, let's use this time for ethics and applying for ethics at the university, getting our research accepted and approved, and so forth. So, and then around June, August, and so I started applying for ethical approval at the university. And at first, when I started initially, what I included on the questions when they asked us how you're going to do your research, I spoke about fieldwork, being there in the field, interviewing people, having face-to-face interactions, and now that's not possible. Now I had to restructure my methodologies and my methods that I'm going to do to conduct research. And that was quite a new experience to me, because to give you my background, as an anthropology student, I started at the University of Johannesburg as an undergrad, and I progressed into my honors there. And what we were taught then was how fieldwork is this thing of collecting primary data and being present in the field, engaging with people in the spaces and so forth. So I carried that knowledge with me throughout my studies, progressing from honors to masters and now PhD. Now I'm on PhD level. All of those things that I've learned are suddenly not applicable anymore. So that's one of the biggest challenges that I faced, and probably by all of us actually. So I chose not to make use of the social media platforms and for the longest time, until my supervisor actually encouraged me and said, you know what, well, might have to actually rethink about doing something in the meantime while you're waiting for your ethics to be approved, for your proposal to be approved by the ethics committee. How about you think about conducting online interview with a specialist and people who know more about the pharmaceutical industry in Tanzania? And only then did I stop ignoring the fact that, okay, we must do something here. We must use this time as an opportunity and not be open to the opportunities that it might provide for research rather than shutting off. So my experience was I was forced to learn and then relearn the things that I knew, and also learn other things about what doing fieldwork means, because based on how we were taught in university as an anthropology student, the idea of conducting fieldwork online was quite not a topic we touched on a lot. It was always about fieldwork being there in the spaces. So I was forced now to challenge what I learned then as a student and look at, okay, what it might mean now for us to do research. Or does it mean we also have to use we have to do our research online, and what mean? So that was in August. No, in July, when my researcher, my supervisor encouraged me to do some interviews online, but unfortunately then I fell sick in around July until August. So everything was on hold again. And after when I told my supervisor about my sickness and my symptoms and how I had this shortness of breath, and I couldn't speak for a long time, I couldn't walk, I was having this fever and so forth. She actually believed that maybe this might be COVID-19. And I also started to believe the same thing too. Like, actually, I might have this virus. And for longest time, everything in my life just stopped, including research. I spent about 2 months trying to rest and trying to recover. And after that, around August, when I was feeling better now to go back to my research, it's only when then I started engaging more with the possibilities of doing online ethnography, arranging interviews via Skype, and using platforms such as WhatsApp or Zoom, possibly to collect some kind of primary data, engage with people, and talk, just to have something to work on. But of course, the social media space provides such opportunities that you can be able to do such research with people being so distant and so far away from each other, but being able to talk compared to before when social media was not available. It also provides the ability to see people, not only by talking, but also some kind of face-to-face interaction. Is particularly for me as phenomenologist who has interest in the body. It's all about that's one of the things that I like about fieldwork, that make me so in denial to accept that now fieldwork might not be possible for me, that I'm going to lose that ability to interact with people physically in the spaces, be able to smell these places that I'm here, touch items, and that sense of physicality seems to be lost. It seems like it was going to be lost. And I thought that by that, I'm going to lose some richness in my data compared to before. I felt that social media is going to provide less compared to being there physically in a space. At the end, I had to accept that. Well, reason that we now speak about fieldwork so much is because there was a time where it was part of a transition of anthropology. Before fieldwork became so familiar, there were things such as armchair ethnography, whereby people then who wrote about other peoples and their cultures or their way of lives relied on the sources collected by other people, like missionaries or sailors, and then use their diaries to analyze that data and write about those people. And then it was only then, after that's challenged, that the idea of fieldwork came about. And now we see ourselves in another context whereby what we know, what we've been practicing, what we've been taught is also challenged by the circumstances we find ourselves with. And again, on a bigger scale, what this means is it provides an opportunity for anthropology itself as a discipline to change, to adjust, and also ourselves as anthropology students and anthropology researchers to change and adjust to the situations that we find ourselves with. Yeah, so yes, I'm going to end there. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Keketso. You've given us so much there as well. And I think, it's so profound. Thank you for sharing that as well, because we often don't think about also what it means to fall sick. I also am someone who got sick this year. And I know even now, I was saying to a friend before this panel that it's actually like, people think about you've recovered, but they don't think about the work that also then you have to recover from, that you were not able to do during the time that you were sick. So sometimes falling sick, I think, is one of those things that's not often accounted for, which is ironic because this panel is about doing anthropological research, but we never think about the anthropologist as the person who gets sick. We think about the participants that we research with, as always. So I think you've given us another layer. You've given us another layer around borders, for instance, because we know that borders up until actually even now, they're not fully open because there's still a very limited number of countries that people can go to. So what does that also mean then for your own research? And again, you've given us more issues around the body, particularly for researchers for whom the body is so central to the process of doing research. And I like that you are introducing this issue of armchair anthropology, because you're showing us, on the one hand, whilst we do have unique and new challenges, but these conversations in some ways are also not new in anthropology around questions of what's authentic anthropologist. What does it really authentically mean to be there, quote unquote, to be there to do research. So I think it's a very layered, and actually, as I listen to all of you, I think, these conversations and reflections could be a round table publication for Southern African anthropology, or a journal because you're giving us so much to think about. So hint, hint, Jess, there's a roundtable publication just waiting for someone to pick it up here. Okay, we'll close off, well, not close off, but we'll close off the main session before we move to question and discussion with Tebogo. Tebogo, I saw you a few days ago, so you've also sent me wonderful things, but please speak through it in your own words and share your reflections.
Hello.
You can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Gcobani, for great sharing. And thank you to everyone who has spoken today. It is a really good space of reflection. Yeah, I've seen how it is a bit cathartic in terms of a debriefing. It's a really great space, and I have related with most of the speakers in terms of challenges in a pandemic in regards to research. So yes, thank you for having me. What stage I am on is in my proposal stage. It has been a really interesting journey. I think what I can take from that is that with preparing the proposal for data collection at this period, I could reflect on, actually, I could look ahead and try to see what I can expect in the field and what I can prepare for. So yes, my topic is social meanings, contested masculinities, and I'm exploring the boys' crisis in the construction of male identity in adolescent youth in a Northwest Province secondary school. So briefly, the main focus is on the boys' experiences of masculinity and interrogating the idea of this boys' crisis of underachievement in academics, especially at secondary school level. I think preparing my proposal at this time has helped me to collect direct observational data, most especially with kids not attending school full time. I have had opportunities to observe how adolescent male youth interact with their masculinity and how they interact with their education. I am fortunate enough to have 4 nephews, one from my half sister and 3 from my full sister. So I have learned quite a bit by spending time with them, and it's helped me to formulate ideas around what masculinity is about in relation to the readings that I've been doing. One thing that I did notice at the beginning was that not all students in high school have access to online teaching and learning. Okay, so what I got from that is narrowing down the type of masculinity that I will be focusing on, a marginalized masculinity, but also kind of referring to want to change the narrative about what Black masculinity means. That common portrayal of violence, I would like to interrogate that further and see what other types of masculinity have been identified in young Black males. And spending time during lockdown with my nephews has helped me to see that they are academic masculinities. My other nephew is very interested in business. My other nephew is interested in becoming someone resourceful in driving. So and one is interested in sports. So there are different types of black masculinities which need to be interrogated. So this time of COVID has been one which has also helped me to look into the internet space and social media. Like most have spoken about the time where social media has been quite vital in collecting data. Yeah, so my methodology now it needs to be revised because of COVID. I'm going to look at hygiene practices and care. So within that, I need to consider the protecting the participant and protecting myself when entering the school premises, and being quite aware of the regulatory social interactions that will be limited if next year I am able to access the school grounds. So data collection quite it depends on it depends a lot on how much safety there will be in the school, how much safety they will consider me to cross over in studying my research. And then so in my methodology, I have 4 things that I wanted to do. I wanted to do questionnaires during home visits. I need to reconsider that because of safety measures. I could move it to school. So, and then journaling by the boys, which is something I don't need to revise because it is something that students can do at home. And then one other thing is looking at the students' social media activity. And having had so much access to internet space over COVID and lockdowns and that, I've seen a lot of engagements online about masculinity, and it seems there is a trending discourse around masculinity, and it is one platform where I could draw a lot of information from. So I do think there have been some tough times, especially in regards to moving from a formal space of academia to a more online space. But it has also been a great time to see how universities offer support. My supervisor has been very supportive in my proposal stage, and there's been an interdepartmental kind of support system where we meet quite often, share academic ideas, and that has been really helpful. Some challenges with connectivity and data, given we were not prepared. So it's taken some time to get used to wanting and finding data and waiting for data, but as time goes, I've realized that institutions are getting used to having to provide data to students. In general, I think it's just an expansion of the ethics that I will be pointing out in my study. How can I protect my participants, and how can I protect myself in a time of COVID while using multimodal methods of collecting data. If one falls through, then I can depend on the other. Thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much, Tebogo. And I think your last point reminds me that this morning I was reading an article. It wasn't by the Minister of Health, but it was quoting the Minister of Health around his concerns that that it's actually not implausible that we might have another lockdown of sorts in South Africa in the next few months before the end of the year, so between November and December. And so I think this idea of this multimodal sort of research collection ethnographic methods will become quite important for a lot of students to think about. And I think it's wonderful that in some ways you are closing us off with because you're still early, because the idea behind this panel was really around not just students who've been able to successfully conduct fieldwork, but also look at the experiences, both the successes, but also the challenges. And I think all of you, in one form or another, have given us that. I like your research because I think one of the things we know with this period is that it's, on the one hand, it's really revealed violent masculinities in South Africa. So just in the first week of lockdown, I'm still stunned by that the police received, I think, something like 80,000 reports of gender-based forms of gender-based violence calls or reports. And so, but also on the other hand, there's also been encouraging articles I've read, less so in the South African context, but I've read quite a few articles on masculinities, especially in the US and Latin American context, where some men have been writing about how this period of time in lockdown has allowed them to rethink masculinity and to engage in various forms of care work, which is often quite feminized. So I do think there's a lot to think about, especially in the schooling system right now, about how boys, particularly marginalized masculinities, are experiencing this moment. And I think also one of the beautiful contributions from your reflection is also, in some ways, all of the other reflections have been outside, and in some ways you've taken us into your home. So observing your nephews, and in some ways drawing autoethnographically on yourself and the young boys in your life. So it's been a very, very useful reflection, not just from you, but the panel. I know that we've gone into way extra time because sadly we started 20 minutes late because of technical difficulties, but I'll take one round of questions if there's anyone in the panel, well, anyone either on the panel actually, or from our audience who might want to add a comment or question. But if not, you can just prepare yourselves. I'll give you just one last minute or so to offer closing remarks, and then we can close this. Just to say, I think it did manage to finally record, and so I will put this up on our YouTube channel. And I'm sorry that we've had all of these challenges. So we have a comment from Jess who says this was a really lovely panel. I agree. Okay, it doesn't seem like we have a hand. So I'm gonna go in the order of the people as they show to me. So Bafana, you are up first. Give us 1 minute or so closing reflection. Bafana?
Okay, thank you, Gcobani. Well, I think, to be honest, this year has been really problematic, but in a way, I've learned a lot and like how to sort of come up with creative ways of managing the field and doing my research. So although it was challenging, it was also an opportunity for us to learn and how to adapt, because we're not really sure if this pandemic or the online learning is going to end with 2020. So it's more of an opportunity to go into the next year and learn how to adapt to these new challenges and come up with more creative ways of navigating the online environment and dealing with this pandemic. So I think my challenges and troubles that I've encountered are more of an experience, and they will help me grow and come up with different, and a better person and a better researcher in the next year. And so thank you everyone in Qobani for this opportunity.
Fantastic. Thank you, Bafana. Keketso?
Hello?
Hi. You're unmuted, so we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Just as a reflection, my experiences of doing research during the pandemic is it often changed how I see things in how often took for granted the benefits that comes with being a university student and the facilities and equipment it provides you, such as data, for example. Most of the time when I was still going to university, I didn't think much about data, and it was easy access, and because the university provides Wi-Fi and it provides also the database to go into and research, and for secondary sources you can use for your research as well. And suddenly during the pandemic, those things were not accessible to me, and I found that now my research is also affected in that way because I cannot access the database. I couldn't access the database on university database outside the university. Now I have to now see now that even data now I have to consider buying data because I needed it not only to study but also to conduct the research itself, such as a possibility of doing research online. What does that mean now for me? And so it's changed that way for me. And when I'm thinking about ethics as well, most of the time as researchers we appreciate most of the time the currency that our participants give. One of the biggest currencies is their time now, and you have to sometimes reciprocate them for your time one way or the other. And now I saw that the currency also shifted to also include data. Okay, if I'm going to invite somebody to be my participant, does it mean that I have to provide them data for them to be able to engage with me? And so those are kind of the things that I thought of, things that I didn't think of much, but because of the pandemic, it shifted how I do things in terms of studying, also researching.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Keketso. I think that point is so profound, actually, and it has huge implications, probably less so for PhD candidates, but we often know, especially in the South African context, across institutions that often honors students and master students are not so well funded. So if we are moving to digital ethnography, it's now usually just an issue of time. But I think, those issues around, if you're going to have a video call with someone, are you going to pay for their data? And what are then the implications, particularly for students without funding? So that's a really profound point. Thank you. Praveer?
Thanks, Qobani. So just in terms of rounding off, the COVID-19 pandemic, in my opinion, has radically changed the way we go about our lives. It's disrupted our lives in many different aspects. It kind of highlighted a lot of the class struggles and access or lack thereof to infrastructure, safe learning environments that students are they kind of need to excel, especially within the postgraduate and even the undergraduate categories. Like although some areas have seen such tremendous growth and like being subject to such great catalysts like AI and the strong push to the virtual, it kind of also further widens the gap between those that are subject to structural inequalities, like the access to computers, data, and even the technical skills you need to kind of create online slide sharing points, share data amongst, like, say, your Google Drive. It highlighted a lot of the inequalities that we are facing, but I guess that's what these panels kind of exist, so we can kind of come together and create novel ways to kind of go about negotiating these challenges. That's basically about it. And just a big thank you to everyone, and a special thanks to Qobani for inviting me for this panel. And I hope to see everyone in person next year at the real conference, at the real actual physical conference. And yeah, that's about it.
Thank you, Praveer. I really genuinely think but it would need one of you to head it up. But I think, the conversations have been so rich from this. Journals often publish round tables, so they do count, but they don't count, for instance, as a full article. But they're often very nice ways for students to start getting their names into journals. And I think there's not just Anthropology Southern Africa, but African Studies and a couple of other would probably be very keen to take this as a really moment in time of how students, because we haven't actually had students themselves writing about their experiences of this. It's always been the lecturers or some kind of researcher. So I think there's so much value in just listening to this, that, as the participants, you could do a very nice round table. We just need someone to really essentially transcribe it and to put it in a nice form that's presentable for journals. But it's just an idea. Okay, second last is Simphiwe.
Thanks, Qobani. So, I don't know how to wrap up. I think it's been quite useful listening to everyone and everyone's experiences. And I mean, like, we all face the same anxieties. And as a part-time candidate, I somewhat feel greater pressure to prove that I'm not loafing, that I'm working. and that's just an additional pressure, as Praveer mentioned, that it's I think doing a PhD or postgrad is it's a lot of moments of solitude and just being on your own with your thoughts. And now with the lockdown, and it just becomes more eerie, being alone and not having habits and stuff. And so another important, parting point is mourning old habits, and allowing ourselves to understand that this is not our doing. COVID came, and we need to somewhat mourn our previous habits, and in order to prepare ourselves to work differently, because otherwise, if we act as if nothing has happened, and as Keketso mentioned, that both of us kind of had our heads in the soil, pretending that this will go away and eventually we'll be able to go do our interviews. Some we've been able to, and some we hadn't. So I think it's that confrontation and understanding of that things have changed, and at the personal level, as Qobani, you were saying, that we're also understanding ourselves, that it's not just about going out, getting the data and starting to write, but how is this affecting us as actual candidates, and those adjustments that we need to do. And I think that's about, so I think that's my kind of closing off, is just us understanding that it's going to be difficult, and we just need to try our best to do what we can. And I don't know, I think in social media, when this all started, I remember seeing Shireen Hassim's post that there's this great frenzy to be productive, like we've been given this this chance by the universe to be at home and just be amazing, be Instagram chefs and do stuff and we forget to internalize what has happened to productivity and to habits. And so I think sometimes, I don't know, take a minute and not fall into the trap of adding additional pressure to ourselves by being super productive because we think we've had all the time. We need to have produced X amount of chapters. So yeah, mourning that was and preparing for the future. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you, Simphiwe. And I think that links to the point that Praveer made earlier on, which is, so much of, ironically, like one of the things that makes the postgraduate experience so highlightable are those moments when, you're bumping into a friend and you're like, I owe my supervisor a chapter. And he also says, I also owe mine and I've been running away from it. But that sort of camaraderie. So even though, like, as you are saying, there's been this push for all of us to write groundbreaking novels and books in this particular time, I think one of the things that is forgotten are all of those other extra things of being able to go for a drink with a friend and debrief if you've had a very lazy writing, run and so on. So I certainly think that that's important, and it does link as well. I think what you are saying to Professor Stedler's comment, which is that he's heard, certainly about the challenges from the panel and difficulties in doing ethnographic research, but also the amazing innovations in this time and your creativity as the panelists in confronting the barriers to the research. And I think that's been one of the things that's come out more clearly from the pandemic, that we didn't want this to be a complaining festival of, how terrible it is. And there's not one panelist here who hasn't in some form or another innovated various forms of still being able to work in this time. So thank you for that. Right, Tebogo, you have the tough task of closing us off with something really profound.
Oh my, nothing profound to say, but thank you to everyone who presented today, and thank you to everyone who attended. I do think that what I have learned from the whole experience with preparing my proposal and in a time of a pandemic is that I have a new appreciation for the resilience in humans, the resilience of the human spirit, that despite everything that has been happening, there is a general spirit of continuing and being hopeful and looking forward. It has also made me think of how we have all grown to care, whether it is the awareness of others, caring for others, caring for ourselves, caring for our families, caring for our social environment. That the care ethic and awareness of the inequalities that are around us, and an awareness as to which direction the world is heading. So, and again, I also have a new found appreciation for ethnography in general, and how firstly, an appreciation of how ethnography was done before and how ethnography can be fused into something new, and ways to help us to engage better with our participants. So, and also a new appreciation for the academic space, because as some of us stated, we miss the actual physical space, that physical environment. But I'm glad that we are all reconnecting and forming new online spaces as part of the academic space. So I don't know if everyone can hear me. There's a bit of a... Okay. Yes. So yes, and finally, it is an appreciation for how we humans can readjust and readapt to new circumstances, and just also enjoying how everyone has found ways to go about their research at a time like this, and that whether there was illness or whether there was data problems, whether there were device problems, there was perseverance and a sense of readjustment. So they're not too profound, but that is what I learned from this experience. And moving forward, I think having heard everyone speak today has just given me a new way of looking at innovation, a new way at looking at the academic space and ethnography in general. Thank you.
Thank you. You certainly gave us. I noted the three profound things that you said. And I'll start backwards, which is the last one was around reconnecting. I think part of what we're trying to do with Gauteng Anthropology is that, you know, a student at Northwest can know that, oh, there is Keketso, there's Simphiwe at Wits, there's Praveer, there's Nadine at UJ. So part of this is really around not just at the staff level for us to connect, but for you all as well to create various forms of communities that can allow you to not feel so isolated, particularly in times like this. You spoke second profound thing was about appreciation. Yeah, absolutely, and I think that goes at so many different levels, at a personal level, at a professional research level, but just really starting to appreciate both the beauties and the challenges that come with doing ethnographic research. And that ties to your last point that I thought was profound, which was really growing to care. And I think, you know, if this moment that we're in, everyone is talking about, you know, what will the post COVID world be? And a lot of people have been writing about how we should not be going to the normal, because the normal was that world where we did not care about each other, we did not care about the environment, we did not care about inequalities and so on. And so what does going to care look like in a post-COVID context for not just ourselves, but how we do research and so on. So I'll call you colleagues now. I think at postgraduate level, we can call you colleagues. So colleagues, I just want to say thank you very much again for joining us. And I'm really sorry about the technical difficulties. I always do a pre-test and nothing came up in the pre-test, so I have no idea what changed 15 minutes before start time, and hence I was a bit frantic because it had worked when my friend and I had tested it. But anyways, I think despite all of this, we've had a really good turnout. And I'm sure I'll put this up on YouTube, and I'm sure we have a couple of hundreds of people now consuming and reading and reading our content. So hopefully people who missed it or who left in those 20 minutes where we had technical difficulties can be able to watch and watch and to be able to really benefit. I certainly feel like I was feeling a little bit down before this session, but it's really lifted my spirit at a personal level. So and I look forward to seeing what else. So you'll be hearing from me and getting emails, me asking you things, including this roundtable thing. I think I'm going to take it up and see if we can find a home for this beautiful discussion that we had. So thank you very much, colleagues. Have a beautiful weekend and Puza Thursday for those who do drink. Speak soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Cheers, everyone. See you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.